Mind the Gap.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
X-L-Ent Reproductions.
The Imagination Gap.
And Atic Atari.
All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello gents, welcome to another week and another show, and our guest today is Gareth from, a magazine. I can't remember the name of it. Can anyone remember the name of the magazine Gareth's from?
Retro Gamer.
Amiga something.
Atari ST Addict.
Pixel Addict. Addict. Welcome, Gareth. We've got some official representation from our sponsors. So we're going to be on best behavior today. Super professional, everyone.
You better be.
And we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what Gareth does at Pixel Addict a bit later. But how's your week been, Gareth? Has anything retro been involved in your week this week?
Well, playing Link's Awakening on the Switch. So is it retro? If it's remastered, I'm not sure. But
it's retro. Yeah,
it counts.
Anything's retro.
That's more retro than vintage. Anyway.
yeah, you're right. You're right.
Chris, how about you? What's your week been like this week?
I went on a 1,200-kilometer round trip to watch a partial eclipse. But whilst there, went to play some mini-putt. I hadn't been to this particular place for over 20 years, and they still have a collection of arcade machines. So they let me grab some footage of those. They said, would you like us to turn them all on for you? Yes, please.
Well,
so, please. Yeah, really nice. Things like Outrunners and just like Lowboy Jammer Cab with Street Fighter 2 on it and a couple of other things. So, yeah, nice little collection. So
will that appear in a future video when you're channel?
A very short one. It was a very quick pan around. It wasn't the reason I was there, and I had to quickly go and pick up my wife from horse riding. She literally phoned whilst I was videoing because I'd finished my game of mini putt, and she wanted picking up from horse riding. So
there you go. Arcades, mini golf, horse riding. A day in the life of Chris. Dave, how's your week been?
My week's been great. I decided I wanted to play Knights of the Old Republic again. It's a 2003 game, so I spent 2.5 hours, and I'm not joking, 2.5 hours fixing it so that it works on a modern computer. Neil, did you
get to use your yoke with that game?
No, do you know what the game is? Or
yeah, it's a first-person game, isn't it? Knights of the Old Republic.
Not really, no. You're behind and you see yourself on screen.
It's a third-person game using a first-person engine.
yes.
What engine is it? Is it the Unreal Engine or the Quake engine?
Could be.
One of them.
Might be.
Probably talking utter nonsense. Anyway, I'll let you speak, Dave.
Yeah, so 2.5 hours to get that working, but it's actually great now I've got it working. Other than that, not much. Just every week it feels as if it's just been a few days.
Yeah. Well, my week's been pretty good. It uses the Odyssey engine, apparently. I just had to look it up. Previously used by BioWare for Neverwinter Nights. So there's the connection.
Yes, it is Neverwinter Nights,
yes.
Yeah. My week's been nice. I've thank you for asking, Dave.
Johnny's been trying to destroy the microphone.
I got to use the lab in earnest this week. Did a lot of work on restoring the...
Neil.
Yes,
Neil,
Dave.
How was your week?
It was great, Dave. I knew he was going to do that too. I got to use the lab to nearly get to the end of restoring the Packard Bell I've been working on, a 1996 machine that for many people won't get a lot of love, but it's one of those machines that I always associate with going to Dixon's at the weekend, popping in and seeing what's the latest computers that are for sale and sort of lusting after certain things that I couldn't afford. Packard Bells were always up there, especially when I was still an Amiga owner, thinking, how am I going to bridge that gap, make my way onto PC ownership? And they were the kind of ones that were becoming more and more affordable. So they have a place in my heart, which is why I'm giving this one some attention. And it was really nice to use that new lab. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing. Yes, Gareth.
Haven't you guys found that the interest in PC, old PCs from the 90s specifically, is just shot through the roof over the last year and a half?
100%.
Yeah.
It's the moving window of nostalgia.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Which is good because I've got a couple that cost me nothing.
Dave.
Is there any link between me starting on this podcast about a year ago and talking about DOS?
That's when it dipped, Dave. It went down.
Oh, Dave, careful, Dave. Your head won't fit in the frame soon if you keep talking like that. But,
in case anyone listening is confused, I don't believe that for a moment.
Is there a ceiling, though? Is there a ceiling to PC nostalgia? Because I think we probably a lot of us started with the off-the-shelf PCs, and then you get into the recycling parts, upgrading, using the same case again. You know, we've talked about this before. At what point does the nostalgia kind of tail off in PCs? Because you just simply can't keep track of what you had. Or a PC was never a PC. It was just a bunch of parts that was ever evolving.
It's an interesting one, actually, because I thought I'd never have nostalgia towards those kind of things, but now it's coming around because of that stupid moving window of time. And so my first one's easily identifiable. It was an Amstrad, so they're very specific, very unique look and feel. Whether I go looking for one, I'm not sure. But then it goes into this grey area, like you're saying there, Neil, where it's just a blur of one upgrade to another. But I think the upgrades become the thing you chase. I want that 3DFX card. I want that sound card. I want maybe that joystick. So it's those specific elements, but potentially.
I've been given an old 2012 PC, which I've got XP and Windows 7 on there, and that for me is still a current PC. It's just so that I can play those games from that era. Whereas just behind me, that's a PC I've literally found in a dump. And it's a DOS Pentium machine. And that, for me, does feel vintage. You know, I want to re-explore that old world, basically.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, having an XP machine opens up a huge window of gaming for you. It takes you all the way back to 2001 and then Windows 7 beyond that. So that's a great machine to have. This is a topic which I think will come up again and again in stories on the subreddit. If you don't know how this podcast works, please head over to reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro, where you can submit your stories and they will become the topic of conversation. And I think we should go into our first story now, guys.
No.
So, Dave, sorry I nearly missed you there. Have you got any housekeeping this week?
Yes. I'd like to welcome our new patron, Colin. Colin is also known as Ponder, where he streams on Twitch under that name. So thank you very much, Colin, for signing up. If you do want to sign up, if you want to join the list of patrons that we have, then go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro. And you can become a patron there. Thank you again, Colin, and to all of our patrons who help make this possible.
It's all very well putting in hour after hour of work to restore a beloved vintage computer, fixing problems with electronics, nurturing plastics back to look like new again, just like I've been doing in the lab this week with that Packard Bell, sourcing hard to find missing parts that you perhaps wouldn't have even unboxed back in the day. So with my Packard Bell, I'm now on a mission to try and discover, do you remember the pencil-thin microphones that used to sit on a little round base? They're very cheap. They used to come with PCs. They were horrible, but now for completeness, when I look at the catalogue with the Packard Bell, I need that thing to put next to it. Why? I don't know, but I'm trying to source one. Or if you had the option to simply buy all of this off the shelf brand new, just buy your childhood computer brand new, not new old stock, new, would you do it? Well, that's not quite the pitch for our next story, but on the surface, it's definitely the hook. A brand new machine that looks exactly like an Atari 800 XL is planned. And thank you to listeners Oz Retro Comp and Marin Bala for submitting this story to our subreddit. Revive-machines.com have presented plans for a beautiful looking brand new Atari 800 XL, which at first glance just looks like the original. But on closer inspection, you'll find an HDMI port and a USB-C port nestled at the rear. Also USB ports on the side next to the D9 ports, and then all of the original ports complementing that. Revive Dash machines, by the way, seem to be based in Poland, and it looks like they were registered in as far back as 2005, from what I can discover. So they seem to have been around for a while, but I'm not aware of any other products that they've come up with. So if you know of any, please do let us know, and we will look into their history. A fully functional cartridge slot is promised, classic monitor output, and even the SIO port, which is 100% compatible with original peripherals. So peripherals including the disk drive, which you could, with that SIO port, I think it was like a very, very early version of USB in the way that it worked. You could daisy chain lots of devices together. Was it USB or was it the ADB, the Apple port? Can't remember now, but you could daisy chain devices together. Really cool port. And it would be great to see that you could use original peripherals as well. Inside is a different story, though, as we find, you guessed it, an ARM and an FPGA combo. And that opens up some fun possibilities in the same way that the ZX Spectrum Next does. You can enjoy it in the original configuration, or perhaps, now there's nothing to suggest that this is what's going to happen, but I would guess you might have options like doubling the clock rate, or maybe a brand new video mode, or extra custom chips, or something crazy like shoving a SID chip into an Atari XL. Of course, software would need to be written to support these, but we've seen this happening with the ZX Spectrum Next, and it's perfectly feasible that it would happen here too. But it's not really the FPGA side that excites me with this project. FPGA is fast becoming the norm when it comes to retro recreations. Slowed somewhat by supply chain issues in recent years, there are signs of that easing up now, and surely this project is going to take some time to come to fruition, so that should all hopefully fall into place with availability. The Twitter account announced that this should be on sale in 2024. Quite how ambitious that is, I don't know, because we don't really know how far along the project is at this stage, only that they're announcing it. What excites me, though, is the case. I felt this before at the prospect of the A500 Maxi and the full-size the C64 when it came out. There's just something about seeing your old favorites mass-produced on the shelves in places like Argos, in the hands of regular casual consumers, if you like, people buying them up. It just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. Those are just two examples that were at the cheaper end of the scale, certainly. But if this is anywhere near as good as the mock-ups make it look, and they do just seem to be 3D rendered mock-ups so far, Gareth can probably confirm that with his experience in the area. They look like 3D mock-ups. But if they're anywhere as good as they look, then there's going to be a lot of drool on a lot of keyboards because they do look fantastic. So, guys, my question to you, does this excite you? Will it be a success? And do you want to hedge any bets on the price while we're at it? Dave?
For me, the 800 XL or the 600 XL or the 1200 XL, the XL range is the most beautiful line of 8-bit Ataris. They did 3 different lines. They did the first generation, which looks a bit cheap, I think. I hope I haven't offended anyone there.
If you've ever picked up a 400 or an 800, there is so much metal shielding. They do not feel cheap. They feel weighty. And I would say they look 70s, maybe is how I would describe it. Not cheap.
The keyboards aren't as good. Yeah, it's just not as good. And then the later range was styled in the same way as an Atari ST. So that's the XE line. And they do look good. But I've got an Atari ST to look that way. There's nothing really that looks like an XL other than an XL. It's a lovely chocolate and cream setup with a little bit of silver on it. Now, I didn't know much about the 8-bit range for Atari. I never had one as a kid. I think they were too expensive when they were new and popular. And by the time that we got in the UK our Spectrums and our Amstrads and so on, I think they didn't really compete very well. But there is a huge range of games on the 8-bit Ataris. Massive range of games. And a lot of things that I thought were Commodore 64 games are actually Atari games. Commodore yet again have come in later than a something and then soaked up all the games and claimed to own them. But there is a real rich history of games on it. It's a great old machine. And like all old machines, the same problems exist. You don't just have to buy the machine, but you've got to upgrade the memory in some cases with the 600. You've got a power supply to replace because the old ones they're not great things to have in the house. There's always a fire risk, or they don't work properly, or they'll kill it. You've got video output, and then you've got flash storage. And that puts the price up, especially as the XL machines in particular aren't too cheap now. The XE ones are a lot cheaper, but the XL aren't so cheap. So this comes across as, rather than being the mini maxi like the C64, it's more like is it the Commodore 65? Is that what was that the recent one? Yeah,
Mega 65,
yeah.
Mega 65,
Mega 65. That's it. Yeah, and the Spectrum Next and so on. So this looks to be hopefully like that. And I think if your 8-bit machine is the Atari XL, then you'll want to buy this. My 8-bit machine's the Amstrad CPC, so if this was an Amstrad CPC, I'd buy it. But I'm not sure if I will. I think it'll be expensive. I'm thinking 500 quid. I know the Spectrum Next was a bit cheaper, but I think the Spectrum Next, and this is pure conjecture, but I think the Spectrum Next, they were extremely good at bringing the price down, and I don't know that anyone else can do it quite as well as they can that way. And I know that the other things like the Mega 65, it was expensive, wasn't it? Was it 600 or something?
It was a lot of money. 600, Gareth? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe 700.
With the Spectrum Next, the first round of Next were pre-pandemic, before we had supply chain issues. And the second round, actually, of the Kickstarter hasn't been delivered yet, because I backed that second round and haven't got it yet. So they've got caught up in the problems. I don't remember the price shooting up at all. But then they have had to work behind the scenes to source an alternative FPGA chip to just make this thing happen. So there's been a lot going on to do that. But there is a great team on the Spectrum Next that are making sure that gets delivered. I agree with you, Dave. I think we'd be having a very different conversation if this was an Amstrad CPC. I think it would just be fanboying. So for anyone that, as you say, if the 800 XL was their machine, they're going to love this, I think. Gareth, was it your machine?
I used one once at a friend's house, but it wasn't actually the XE range or the XL range. It was the original 70s one. And I enjoyed it, but our folks then got us onto the Commodore range of computers, first the VIC-20. So that's basically where I left Atari behind until I got an ST. So I'm intrigued by it. I do. While you were talking, Dave, I was wondering about copyright, actually. That just suddenly popped into my head. Who owns the copyright or the IP for the case? Because if you look at the Spectrum Next, there was some deals done with Sky to, not necessarily with the case, but it's a different case, so it's new. The C64, I think there was some discussions with the IP owners to use the bread bin. But do they have the rights to use that Atari case? I don't see anything on the website about it.
And the question is who owns the rights to it, because this was Jack Trammell's Atari, wasn't it? The Atari microcomputer that was split away from the console side. Atari comes up later in the show today, so we will have more conversations about rights and things that they do and don't own. But who owns the case, I don't know. And also what made me chuckle a little bit is instead of Atari on the label, it says RM800XL. RM for Revived Machines. But RM reminds me of RM Machines here in the UK. We used to have the BBC Micro, and then some people had the RM range of machines in their schools. RM Nimbus, Dave?
Yeah, I wonder how far along this project is, because if they're only now at their proposal stage, if they're still talking to the rights holders, which may be the case, then there's nothing wrong with them putting mock-ups and saying, look, let's see what interest there is. It may be that they find there's not the interest they want, or on the other hand, it may be they find there's loads of interest and it makes it possible. And imagine they're probably still talking about money to these people. So, I think that's reasonable.
I mean, copyright, as long as the holders can be located, copyright is a check away. Name your price and let's negotiate from there. So
So Gareth, let's just assume we can get over the legalities of this. Are there any things that you like about this?
Well, I enjoy the retro hobby. I enjoy the software side more than the hardware side. So especially as I get older, I don't really want to be servicing my Amigas and my Commodores when I'm 79. So I'd be quite happy to use some of that retirement money to buy a machine like this and experience the world without the pain of maintaining an old machine. Definitely.
I think that carries into the YouTube world a lot because increasingly I see a direct correlation between the amount of effort I have to put into fixing a machine and the amount of use. People love watching other people have to go to that hard work. But when it comes to doing it yourself, there's a price on everything. And if this falls within that price bracket, then you'll probably just buy it and enjoy using it and not worrying about it breaking. Chris, what do you think about this? Let's get some balance, because there were a few digs that didn't go unnoticed by Dave there about Commodore. So let's redress the balance, please.
I don't think we need to stoop that low, But anyway, I mean, at the end of the day, I have noticed there's a lot of love for the 800 XL, so I can understand why they would target this machine. A lot of YouTubers are covering the original machines at the moment. It's not something I ever play with myself, so I have no connection, no nostalgia, and very little knowledge on the machine itself. For me, Atari of that period was about the arcades and about the 2600, the games console in most people's lounges. And that's where my connection is from that time. But I do love all of these all new projects, the fact that you can just recreate a machine from the ground up. And as everybody here has already said, it will just work. And I like the idea of something hopefully being mass produced to the point of being sold in stores. I don't know if this will be, but one of my comments on the first Kickstarter campaign for the Spectrum Next to the group, and I hope it was taken in the right way because it was meant as an encouragement, was I don't want to buy something like that on a Kickstarter. I want to walk into W.H. Smith's and see that box on the shelf, and that's where I want to buy it. And I would have happily forked out.
In fact, you did do that, didn't you, with the A500? You did enjoy doing that. Yeah.
So the A500 Mini, and it was great, and not quite the same as if it was a full size A500. That would be even better, and I do hope they go to that. Whatever shape they choose to do, I don't care. I'll walk into the shop and I'll buy it, because what I'm buying is that experience, that nostalgic experience of just seeing the branding in a shiny, glossy, finished cardboard box on the shelf, for handing over my money and taking that box home in the car. I mean, I'm smiling even just talking about it. It would be fantastic. So it's a shame that something like the Spectrum Next didn't go that way, but I understand why they wanted to keep it to Kickstarters, and they've done a great job with that project. And I just love seeing more and more machines finished in this way. For example, Retro Recipes Christian recently revisited the idea of the all-new C64, because some of the replacement chips that he didn't have for his first video are now available, and he got hold of some prototypes and finished that project off as well. So yeah, fantastic. Even though the X800 XL isn't something I have attachment to, fantastic project. Love it.
Yeah, well, certainly one to watch, I think. And given the excitement that I feel when I see these kinds of projects, part of me does wish that they would simply focus on the case and only the case. Fill a case like that with all kinds of mounting points to let me put a Pi in there, or a Mister, or even an original system board from the system. I've got a couple of old mini ITX PCs kicking around in the cave, which aren't worth very much and they aren't doing anything, but they'd be ideal to put in a case like that and run some emulators, or even run a modern operating system just in a fun case. So yeah, I don't know why the case excites me so much, but it does. Dave?
There is a little bit of an issue with Mister in that there's not enough I.O. lanes for it to work for what I want to happen. But what I would love to happen would be for Mister to have, instead of an I.O. board or like the MMS board that you're part of, Neil, for someone to come out and say, here is your Atari 8-bit board for the Mister. Here's your Amstrad CPC board. Here's your ZX Spectrum. Here's your Commodore 64. And you plug the Mister into that, and that then is port compatible with a reproduction case or original case, so that you can have your flavor, your own Mister in the case. And if you want to, it can be emulating that particular machine, or you can have it go into other cores as well, but it won't happen yet. It won't happen with the current Mister project because there's not enough in I.O. lanes there for it to work with. It needs more I.O. lanes, and once that's there, perhaps that's what we'll see. And that, yeah, I agree. That would really be good if you could have whatever you want inside your Atari XL case and have it look just like this.
Yeah, and that is essentially what this is going to be. Whether or not they start to port some of those existing cores across from the Mister project to work on this or not remains to be seen, but it's perfectly viable that may or may not happen. But of course, first of all, they've got to finish it and they've got to sell it and they've got to have a customer base to use it. So this is definitely one to watch. Delivery, I don't know when, but on sale in 2024, they say. So who knows how long delivery will come after that, but we'll keep a close eye on it, and no doubt it will come up again in a future show, and you can find links to it in the show notes, as with every story that we discussed today.
We are sponsored, thank you very much, by Pixel Addict Magazine. Pixel Addict Magazine are a monthly magazine that comes out every 6 weeks, which we recently learned. Thank you for telling us, Pixel Addict. And we have one of the reasons we have Gareth on here today, and not just because of his work in Pixel Addict, is because Gareth does the covers for Pixel Addict. Now, I like the covers for Pixel Addict. I was talking about them when we come up. We talk about the dinosaur, for example, and so on. But Gareth, this is what you do, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So I'm a motion graphics designer by day. Well, I used to be more of a programmer, to be honest, these days. But I still love. That's where I got my start on the Amiga with Reimagined and Deluxe Paint and all that stuff back in the 90s. And yeah, creating stuff is what I really enjoy, and it's part of my enjoyment of the retro hobby is the creative side of it. So yeah, I started writing for Pixel Addict as well, and then I was like, well, let's do a cover, and I did that Rubik's Cube one, and it just snowballed from there. Each month there was a new challenge. We usually have about a week or a week and a half to get the cover done. So there's a little bit of a discussion on the Discord around the theme. And then there's usually a big rush to get it done because, sometimes I have to build the things. Sometimes we buy in the models, like that dinosaur. I didn't model that dinosaur. They would have taken way too long. But some very talented person actually built it and rigged it. So it was easy for me to move the limbs around and get it into into its position. So
yeah. Well, while Gareth's talking, hopefully Duncan's been edited in some screenshots that Gareth's provided us with. Looks like you're using Blender, and there's another art package with a sort of purpley logo. What's that one?
That's Affinity Photo. So
Affinity Photo.
I don't subscribe to the Adobe Cloud, and I was looking for an alternative, and it's actually a British company. They've got 3 packages: Affinity Designer, Affinity Photo, and there's a page layout program which I forget the name of. But they're incredibly powerful tools, and you don't pay a subscription, which I really like. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you do a fantastic job with those covers. They're always very striking.
Thank you.
But, important question for you, Gareth. Should we judge a magazine by its cover?
Oh, definitely. I'll buy music based on its cover. I'll buy books based on its cover. But I'm a visual person. So.
There we go. Well, you can look out for Gareth's covers, past and present, at pixel.addict.media. Dave, is there a new edition out yet, or when's the next magazine due?
Yeah, so the new edition was in your shops about a week or so ago, and it's got a lot on it about DOS. I hoped to sit down and read it all this week. I've not had a chance. There's been things going on in the background with family, but I hope to sit down and read it. There's a lot I'd like to read in it. I love DOS. I like... in fact, we mentioned that DOS is coming up in the past year or so. It's really coming up. So I like that because there's so many good games to talk about in DOS. So yeah, this 6 week. You've got a fortnight for 2 weeks. You've got a month for a month. What do you call 6 weeks? Is it just 6 weeks? This 6 weekly magazine, whatever it is all about DOS.
Hang on, I've got it. Quinquennial.
Quid.
Really? Wow.
No, that's not right.
What?
No, sorry, Google's lied to me. Google's lied to me. Said, is there a word for every 6 weeks? And it says quinquennial, and then I click on it, and it says quinquennial, consisting of 5 years. That's not 6 weeks. Why?
Close enough. Close enough.
There you go.
You can also buy Pixel Addict in your newsagent, where if you go to your newsagent and it's there, the cover will jump out at you because they're that good.
Buy it for the cover.
Definitely.
This week, I've picked a 4-panel comic for the story. I've done it for 3 reasons. First of all, it's by far the most upvoted submission to the subreddit this week. And for people who don't know, people submit stories and there's a little arrow you can click to indicate that you like us to talk about this story, and people wanted to talk about it. So I picked it for that. I also think it's, while it is a funny comic, I quite strongly disagree with the thought behind it. So I think it's a great talking point. And the third reason, of course, is that Gareth is on this week, and that's what he does. He produces the covers for Pixel Addict to try and get people to buy it. So thank you to Starcade 2084 for submitting it. It's a 4-panel comic which shows a wee guy, and in the first, he's holding a game box, and he says, "Wow, this looks awesome." The next panel shows the cover of the game, and there's a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, a Tyrannosaurus, a jet fighter, a ninja, and someone who looks like Rambo. It's like they've been ripping off Gareth's covers. The third panel shows him playing what looks like an Atari 2600 on an 80s TV, and the game on screen is a combination of Pong and Space Invaders. Simple, blocky graphics. And the final panel shows his little disappointed face, unhappy, and the caption for the whole thing is, "What video game covers deceived you?" So, yeah, I do get that. I do get that was the case. But I want to talk about something called the imagination gap. And the first and only time I've heard the phrase imagination gap was used on the podcast, and it's a proper podcast, unlike this one, called the Ted Dabney Experience, which they interview people from the classic arcade area. It's a really good podcast. We mentioned it before. I think it's fantastic, though. And to explain what the imagination gap is my own terms, because I couldn't find it as an online thing. Maybe it is an online thing, but it was difficult for me to find, at least. It's the distance between the game that you play on the screen, be it a text adventure, a platform game, a 3D space shooter, the space our imagination fills between what's actually there on the screen and the experience that we actually enjoy. And it's vital for old games, and I think in many cases it makes them better. We talk about books, for example, and the film of the book. It might be easier and more engrossing on the silver screen, but it can't quite do what imagination can do. Now, old games had various different ways of doing it. You had the feelies and the browsies from Infocom games. You had the great big thick manuals in flight sims. You had novellas in games like X-Wing and Elite, a little short book for you to read to get you started. But I think the most popular was the actual cover of the game itself. And my favourite pre-computer art ones, like the ones you see on Atari 2600 games or some 8-bit games, and actually loads of the SSI RPG games that I have behind me, they're all done with hand-drawn art, and I think they're fantastic. But perhaps my favourite is the cover of Driller by Steiner Lund. But it's not all plain sailing. Some covers really did set up a game that wasn't there, and they hinted at gameplay that really didn't exist. Now, Neil, what helps you fill the imagination gap? Are there good or bad examples for you?
Yeah, I can give you a very specific example. So the first game that really fooled me was called Rigel's Revenge, like Nigel, but with an R, which makes it more exciting. I remember exactly where I bought it. I bought it in Superdrug on Dorchester High Street in Dorset. It was on the pegboard because it just had a small section for 8-bit games. It was a cassette tape, but it had that cardboard backing with the hole on the top to hook it on. So I think that cardboard backing probably covered, if there were any screenshots, it covered the screenshots, so I didn't get to see any. And that should have been the first sign of perhaps an error on my part. On the front cover is a picture of a guy. I assume this is Rigel. He's got a scar on his face. Sorry?
Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck? Yeah, there is a Tom Selleck look to him. Yeah, it's the mustache. He's got a manly mullet. He's got a mustache. He is holding what looks like an Uzi, and then he's looming over a city skyline. And then lower down on the box cover is another guy with shades, a big muscly guy holding a bloodied body under one arm, shooting a machine gun with the other arm. I mean, it's all going off on this cover, and it looks like pure action. It would have been $1.99 or $2.99, pocket money game. So I bought it on the spot. I rushed home to play it. And to cut a long story short, it was a text adventure. So yeah, try as I might, I couldn't leap the imagination gap with that, because I hadn't set out. It wasn't my expectation to play a text adventure. I wanted an action arcade game, and that's certainly not what I got. So that is the first time that really happened to me. So what does really help is, Dave, today you are wearing an Ultima 7 t-shirt. No, Ultima 6 t-shirt. Sorry, Ultima 6 t-shirt, which is the perfect example of a game that helps to bridge the imagination gap with feelies and browsies and all of that sort of stuff that you mentioned. Lore books, all of that helps. But the one thing that makes a huge difference for me, no matter how bad the graphics are in a video game, is a map of the world that you can stick on your wall. You look at this map and you wonder, how do you get to these different areas? How can you get safely back? When you're not playing the game, you're looking at the map on your wall and you're just pondering your next move. I think even today, every modern game should come with a map that you can stick on your wall. It just expands your mind, expands the game infinitely. Even if there are areas of the map you can't even get to, that haven't even been programmed in the game, it just gets your imagination going and adds to the mystery of it all. While reading this, I saw another story submitted this week to the subreddit about the imagination gap from the perspective of the younger generation. Now, I am the last person. I hate dividing generations and trying to pick fault in different generations' perspectives. I'm not picking fault in this. I just found it an interesting story submitted thanks to Dr. Local. It's on thegamer.com and it's entitled, "Why Are Retro Games So Creepy?" And the writer of this talks about anxiety induced by things like game fog and fixed camera angles in older games, which make it impossible to see what's coming around the corner, or even being creeped out just by the low polygon count of, an example he gives is The Sims. Creeped out by The Sims. So, in the 1970s, we had game designers having nightmares about making Missile Command and nuclear annihilation. Now there's a generation having nightmares about The Sims and things like Resident Evil and its fixed camera angle and not being able to see what's coming around the corner, which actually for us, we knew that was part of the mechanic of the game, but also it was a cutting edge game at the time and it was part and parcel of what was possible with the technology. So I get that if you're approaching that out of context, and you don't feel like you're on the cutting edge, you're just looking back at these retro games, it almost feels like it's more of a stylistic choice than a technical choice. And things like grainy textures and short view distances could feel a bit like a low-budget horror movie, I guess, taken out of context. So I get that kind of creepy feel and how you could come to that conclusion. Probably varies a lot from game to game, but I say that The Sims was thrown in there as an example, so who knows? But there we go, a different perspective altogether about the imagination gap, and not using the imagination gap to enhance a game, but just to feel a bit more scared and creeped out by a game. Gareth, is this an interesting one for you? Given all the things you do with the Pixel Addict covers, you must be a very visual person. How does that affect your gaming?
So, if I think back to when I was a kid, my brother and I never felt that we were being cheated by what was on the covers of the games that we were looking at. It was almost like we were getting a look into what the designers were thinking the game should be in their head. So it was almost like, I've got a good example here, like Impossible Mission.
Yes.
I remember getting this and just this cover with that sort of 80s laser type sort of imagery. So when I played the game, that sort of informed the game because you've got 320 pixels across, well, probably 160 back in the 64 days. There's not much they can do. So it became a thing for when you stepped away from the game, the cover and the game sort of blended together to create an experience that you remembered. And I think that's sometimes what happens when you go back and you play a game and there's this disconnect and you go, but I don't remember it being like this, because I think nostalgia and your brain has melded it into a cohesive experience,
Yeah, that's when you fall into the trap then of saying, right, I'm going to have a retro room and I'm going to put the posters on the walls and I'm going to try and capture that feel as well. And I'm going to play the music of the time. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, Gareth. Be careful.
Yeah, I mean, it's black and white films are another example. Quite often I'll watch a black and white film and then you forget that you're actually watching a black and white film while you're watching it. It's just a film, So.
There's some crossover there. A black and white film and a retro video game is best played on a rainy day when you can hear the rain outside. And that takes me back to being a kid, stuck in my room on a rainy day playing video games. Just something about the rain. And even better if you've got the smell of hot asphalt as the rain falls on it. Oh, that's the perfect retro. I need to pipe that smell into the cave. Rain on hot roads.
Maybe not when it's Psycho, though.
That'd be perfect.
Chris, I see in the notes you've posted sorry, Gareth, did you have something else to add there?
No, the last point I wanted to... you see this in visual effects films where less is often more. If you take a movie like Transformers, for example, they put so much detail into the visual effects as opposed to an older film, say like Blade Runner, where there's a lot of fog and the detail is almost imagined by a person. Yeah. And I think that it's somewhat similar with video games, older video games like Monkey Island or something. You've got to allow your mind to fill in the gaps for it to be a richer experience, basically.
The threat of Jaws is far scarier than actually seeing Jaws. In many ways, much like Chris. Yeah. Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I like the way we've segued into horror because that's another thing I love. And yeah, Alien is a great example. You don't get to see the monster. And that was what made it so good. And then modern iterations, all they do is show you a CGI monster. Yeah. And it ruins it. They don't get it. They just don't get it. It's the tension that is scary, not actually what the monster looks like. But anyway, yeah, back to computer games. And it's interesting what you said there, Gareth, about, sort of blurring what we remember of a game and what the game was really like, because that's the exact experience I've been through earlier this week. And I revisited one of my favorite Spectrum games, which is Skyrunner, a game not many people talk about, and for good reason. But I still love it. I actually love it. Once I got my head back into the context and back into the zone, I still liked revisiting it. But the best thing about it is the artwork. So it's got this really nice sort of jet bike speeding past some explosions. And then behind that superimposed is a close-up of this sort of space age helmet of the rider, which sort of fits the aesthetics of the jet bike as well. And it's just a really exciting cover. But of course, with the limitations of the Spectrum, and I think this was available on other platforms as well, probably was, most games of the time were. But when I revisited it, there's a first part of the game where you're in this sky skimmer and you have to take out these towers, and then you get to drop this exciting jet bike. And when it dropped, I'm like, oh my goodness, that just looks terrible. Because it was the limitations of the time. It's the 8-bit era. But then you get back into playing it, you accept the context, and you're still speeding past these trees. When I played this game as a kid, when I went out on my bike, I was then imagining Skyrunner as I went through the local woodland on my BMX, on my mountain bikes with my mates, and, cutting it close to trees. Skyrunner was in my head as I did that. And I was able to, slowly get back there. But again, it was blurred. The game visually is not as good as I remember it being. And you really have to fill that imagination gap. You have to do it to enjoy the experience. So that's the one that sticks out to me. Echelon on the Amiga, and I know, Neil, you've got a copy of this in the fake shop for the C64, but it's the same box art. Beautiful, beautiful box art. This really nice, futuristic-looking spaceship with the sort of wings sloping down either side, landing on some really nice, ornate alien planet. And when you play it, even on the Amiga, it's just literally an 8-bit game thrown at a 16-bit platform for the Amiga version. It's just a wireframe space game that is confusing as heck and you can't work out what you're doing. And I remember standing in Megabytes, my local computer shop, for about half an hour deciding what to spend my well-earned pocket money on, or my paper round money as it was at that time. And Echelon was the game of choice, and getting home and just having to choose to be happy with my purchase. And it was entirely based on that box art. And then the last one for me, and this is for a reason that we haven't picked up on, because this hasn't been done very often, but it's Cosmic Conflict on the video pack, or the Philips G7000 or Magnafox Odyssey 2. Not so much for the cover, because at the end of the day, it was, it's the 8-bit era. We know graphics are simplified, very similar to the Atari 2600 in terms of capabilities of the machine. So the graphics of the box art are just what we would call in this day and age clickbait to get you to commit your money. But they actually lied with the screenshots. There's 3 screenshots across the top of this bit of box art, and one of them shows what is definitely not a TIE fighter, because they didn't have the IP to have a TIE fighter, so it's just something that happens to represent a TIE fighter, but it's on an angle, and that wasn't possible in the game. And I remember playing this game over and over and over, progressing through the levels, expecting to get to this higher level where the TIE fighter would come in at me at an angle, because I'd, maybe as I progressed through the game, I would see that kind of graphics. No, and if you zoom in, it's actually the pixels that the machine is capable of is not capable of tilting that TIE fighter on that angle without it being really blocky. So they literally manipulated the screenshot to make it look more exciting. That doesn't happen often.
Ooh.
So, yeah, those are mine.
Ooh. Wow.
And, of course, anything by Psygnosis. Apart from Lemmings and Armageddon, I'll let those 2 pass. But other than that, yes, they were great games and they were fantastic box art. But I was often confused as to how one met the other. Does that make sense?
I'm surprised at you with Armageddon, because that was kind of part flight sim 3D, a bit like Carrier Command. That was a fun game.
No, that's what I'm saying. I said except Armageddon. So except Lemmings and Armageddon, where the box art, I think, does match the game.
Does match up. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Everything else was so conceptual in terms of the box art and the design that you had to have some kind of weird abstract mind or be in another plane to understand what they were going for. Yeah.
Gareth.
Yeah, you just talked about Psygnosis. I remember I was in the States at the time, and I bought Shadow of the Beast.
Yes.
And it was such an experience, because it had the T-shirt in it and that big, sexy box with this amazing. It was the guy who did the album covers for Yes.
Roger Dean.
Yeah, Roger Dean. Yeah, I mean, it added to. I mean, okay, look, the game was an amazing visual experience anyway. Let's call it an audio visual experience, and the box was part of that, and. So that's a really good example of a very narrow imagination gap, but it really worked well.
Did you ever play Shadow of the Beast while wearing the Shadow of the Beast T-shirt?
I don't know, but I must have.
The full experience to become the Beast. I'm really glad you brought that game up, because many episodes ago we had a conversation about what's the stupidest, most expensive thing that you've bought in your retro hobby. And I pushed that boundary back this week when I came across the opportunity to buy that gorgeous big boxed version of Shadow of the Beast 2, not Shadow of the Beast 1 that I've got. Shadow of the Beast 2 with the T-shirt still sealed, never opened, never worn, all brand new old stock. So I picked that up this week, and we'll move on before anyone asks me how much I paid for it. Dave.
I know where you got it, but I'm not going to say.
Okay. How much did you pay for it?
150.
There already are some great examples on the subreddit. Did he say? Did he give us a figure?
No, he didn't say anything.
Yeah, let's go on. Move on.
There are some great examples on the subreddit. People have been replying, and someone brings up an important point where they complain about a Spectrum game that they bought, which had Atari ST screenshots on the back, making it look better. Same idea as what Chris has said about the video pack game. But I did notice some people saying that Imagination did work, and that's my point. A good game set up just right will leave a gap, and your imagination will fill it.
Atari, the name we used to love, but now love to, well, question, and we're at it again. In fact, we've already mentioned them this episode. So according to Stephanie Mlott on PCMag.com, they've now acquired the rights to over 100 PC and console games from the 80s and 90s. And these include titles from Accolade, Infogrames, and, wait for it, especially yourself, Neil, Microprose.
Ooh.
Yes. There's not much depth to the story on PC Mag, I'll be honest. But some of the titles listed include Busby, 1942 Pacific Air War, Hardball, F117A, Demolition Racer, and F14. Some of the brand acquisitions have Atari heritage, and I'm sure one of you lads more schooled in things like how Accolade and Infogrames fit into Atari's timeline will fill the gaps. But Microprose and F117, what the hell is that doing in the hands of Atari where Microprose itself exists and was trying to launch its own games again? As we've covered before. So, guys, let's just dive right into the conversation. What do you make of this?
Didn't Infogrames buy Atari out in 2008?
Well,
so now Atari are buying Infogrames back. Didn't that happen?
Yeah, I think they did.
Infogrames are now Atari SE.
Right.
So Atari ST was formerly Infogrames Entertainment SE. I thought that, but I've just Googled to check to make sure I'm not talking nonsense. So yeah, they were. So they've been buying some of their old stuff back by the looks of things there. So that sounds okay, I guess. Yeah. I love Atari arcade stuff. Atari arcade machines, the sound on them, just the whole feel of them are great. And it is fair to say that over the years, they've done some great work. Not always great, but they've done some great work on bringing old games to the end user in an easy way to play. I know Chris has talked about the much maligned, is it the flashback you call them?
Yeah.
Or just the games in a stick thing that people look down the nose about them, I think, and I don't think they should, because they're great for what they are. I know we have MAME and we have Mister and there's Pandora's Boxes and all the rest of it, but it is just not as simple as playing a game you want to play without having to go through those hoops. I talked earlier on about playing Knights of the Old Republic 2.5 hours to get it working properly on widescreen. I've set up MAME recently, and that wasn't quite as easy as I wanted it to be. So I hope that perhaps Atari are planning to do some way to bring these games back in a polished, easy-to-play way so that people can enjoy games that are timeless classics.
Yeah, so for me, Atari is firmly placed in the 70s and 80s. That's when I experienced the 2600 and the 8-bit micros. And then when the crash happened, sort of Atari died with that crash for me. Afterwards, they were still around, but they were more I saw them as a publisher of other people's work. And they never got back to that sort of hardware greatness. I mean, I had an Atari ST, and it was a good machine until I got an Amiga, but sorry, Dave.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with saying that, because the rabid Amiga fan will tell you that it wasn't a good machine until you had your Amiga. It was never good. But no, it's true. The ST was great in its day.
Yeah, no, it was. So, yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I'd like to see with this is for it to not be a cheap cash in an old IP and just bringing back the old games, but actually do something where they give the IP or bring in some indie developers, for example, people where they allow some experimentation and exploring that IP, and maybe they're doing some more modern pixel art games. So what if we got a flight simulator that was almost a bridge between the 16-bit and the 32-bit era. But a modern version of that, I'd love to see that type of exploration, basically, rather than just give me back the old stuff again,
Neil, Microprose, come on.
Microprose, yeah. So I'm guessing the new Microprose doesn't own the assets of the old Microprose because they're churning things out, and someone else has now chosen to sell the old Microprose assets to Atari, or some of them, because if you were going to shout about Microprose, you would surely see names like Pirates pop up and Civilization, and we're not seeing those, so it's not the full set, of course. Personally, I think it's better that franchises that are familiar and loved make their way to companies that might actually develop them. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy that it's shifting around, and it might happen. But this is Atari, so there's also the chance that your next episode of your favorite franchise will just be an NFT. Maybe accessed via Winamp after last week's story. You don't know. But, it doesn't include them all. So, for example, we know that new Microprose is working on a new B-17 Flying Fortress and have been for about 4,000 years and aren't updating us on it. So, Microprose, hello, where is my B-17? Please update us. You can come on the show. We'll dedicate a whole show to the new B-17. Come on.
You got that
Tell
right.
us all about it.
Neil, that actually might happen.
Really?
That might happen, Neil, now you say it, because we know they watch it. They watch the show. So that you may have
commented before. Yeah. Come on, make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll even green screen myself into a B-17 for the whole episode. But there's some interesting names that pop up. Hardball, for example, oddly, is a game that's very close to my heart because, like John Madden's football, Hardball is the game that taught me about baseball, taught me all the rules of baseball, and has stuck with me ever since. So I smiled when I saw that. But can I see Atari investing the money needed to develop a modern-day flight sim from the ground up for something like a new F-117A? No, that's going to be a lot of money for probably quite a low return when you consider the other flight sims that are doing well out on the market at the moment. They're very high-quality games. So they would either have to farm that out to someone else, like new Microprose, who seem to have a 3D engine that they're recycling for lots of different titles now. Or more likely, this is where I'm going to put my money, we're going to see Atari repackaging retro games, maybe with DOSBox, maybe with something else, and seeing some compilations, or just seeing these old games appear on Steam under the Atari brand. That's what I would guess. What I would hope for is new games. What I would hope for is maybe physical versions of old games so you can buy them again. But I think we're probably just going to see digital downloads of repackaged retro games. I don't think that's too controversial a take on it.
No, I don't think so. F-117 is a really weird title for me because even the aircraft, I'm going to make you all feel old. The stealth fighter has been retired because it is that old, and it was retired a while ago. The F-117 is not a new aircraft at all. So yeah, that makes me feel old anyway. And F-22, of course, was done by Ocean and DID. So I mean, that would be the model equivalent. But anyway. There we go. Thanks, Starcade 2084, for alerting us to this. It is very odd news, and it's Microprose is the title in my mind when I say that. Maybe all I can think of, maybe Microprose did own the rights to those games, and they're going to use this as a bit of a cash injection. I don't know. Yeah, that's all maybe. I can. Yeah, that's my only logic behind it. Anyway, I've noticed some chat about this, and saying that basically Atari is attacking the very notion of abandonware. Now, sadly, the fact is, the word is simply our excuse to keep pirating old games. Abandonware has no legal meaning at all, never has. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Neil?
Abandonware is just a word that you put in the search engine to find copywritten software that you want to pirate.
It's so true.
Unless there are some instances where the developer has officially declared it abandonware and released the rights to it. There are some examples of that. Yeah. But generally, you're looking to pirate games.
Yeah, that's right. There's other than the 70-year rule, that's the closest thing I can think about in copyright and intellectual property. And I quote copyright.com.au on this. In general, copyright in text, images, and music lasts for 70 years. After the year of the creator's death, even if the creator does not own the copyright. And as far as I'm aware, this clearly does not apply to games made in the 80s and 90s because not enough time has passed. So Atari's agenda aside, they're not making it harder for us to download old games legally. We weren't doing it legally to begin with, but hands up, that's the reality. So let's just hope they do something good with these IPs and don't charge the earth for it. And to come full circle, I'd possibly trust, actually, the current Atari to do something useful with F117 than the current Microprose.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's controversial. What have the current Microprose done wrong? They've done nothing wrong, have they?
No, they've not done anything. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
don't let us catch you. Don't let us catch you photocopying those Pixel Addict covers either. I want to see that. Time now for our question of the week. So last week's question was set up by Mark. Was it Chris or was it Mark? I can't remember who set this question last week. It was me. It was a combo, and it came together to one simple question, which was nothing to do with retro games. What was your favourite childhood snack that you can no longer buy? So,
excuse me, sorry.
Go on, Dave. Oh, I thought he was going to.
He's going to get a snack. You've made him hungry.
Dave's got hungry and disappeared for a snack, so we'll carry on without him. There's a note here which says, "Anyone remember Pacers?" Which I think Duncan has put that note in. Pacers. I don't remember Pacers.
No, I don't remember Pacers.
Let's look them up. Pacers snacks, just for Duncan. Mint. Oh, I do remember them. Okay, so they were mints that had a green stripe on the wrapper.
Oh, hang on.
Does that ring any bells?
Let me have a look.
As soon as I saw them, I was like, yes, I remember them.
It's Chewy a basketball team from Indiana. That's all I'm getting.
No. Chewy mints with a green stripe. Yes, I do. A very distinctive taste. Yeah. So there we go. So let's look up your answers this week. Dave has returned with a...
Dave's going to do an unboxing.
Dave, do you remember Pacers?
Yes.
There we go.
Were they the minty kind of green and white things?
You got it, the stripy mints.
Dave remembers.
Okay,
Orpheus 2 just arrived.
What's arrived?
The Orpheus 2, the Gravis
ultrasound.
Ultrasound.
The sound card.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Are you going to put that in your ISA slot or your ISA slot?
It's going in my ISA slot where it belongs.
Okay, so the top answer this week comes from Tej, who says Spangles. Anyone remember Spangles?
I remember the name.
Oh,
Spangles.
What are they?
Sound like a pop band.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Bengals less popular.
They were boiled sweets, little hard boiled sweets.
I probably choked on one.
Well, I thought we'd get more of a response for Spangles because it's the most uprated one. But in 2008, Spangles topped a poll of discontinued brands which British consumers would like to see most revived. So there's a lot of love out there for Spangles, if not here for some reason.
Am I misremembering that they discontinued Whisper and then brought it back?
Oh, I don't remember that. Maybe Whisper Gold, but I don't remember Whisper itself being discontinued. Okay, next answer. Chris, do you want to read the next answer?
I do indeed, because it's what I remember. Remington Noiseless says, I was going to say Wham bars, but you can still buy them. Oh no.
Well, that's not, we can't have that then. That's not.
We can't have it. I do remember Wham bars. And they did indeed, as somebody else said, remove your fillings.
No, sorry. The question was which you can no longer buy. So
he does all.
Do the next one.
He goes on to say, but there was something similar which was fruity and orange coloured with some sort of jungle picture on the front. I missed them, but can't remember what they're called.
Oh, yeah, I remember those, but I don't remember the name.
Yeah, there were a lot of those.
It wasn't Curly Whirly, was it? They had a jungle picture on the front, didn't they?
No, but that's not fruity.
No, it's not fruity. No, you're right. It's not fruity. It did remove your fillings, though.
Yeah, there were a lot of Wham style bars in the 10p and 1 penny sweet section of the shop, weren't there?
Was it Umbongo sweets? I know it's Umbongo drink, but did they bring out a sweet? Because that's what it felt like. Umbongo.
Yeah, there was a what's that orange vial stuff that you drink, Dave? Iron Brew. There was an Iron Brew Chewy bar as well.
Was there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Iron Brew Chew, yeah.
Yeah.
You can still get that. Iron Brew Chew has not been discontinued. So that's another one that doesn't count.
Okay, so Chris, you need to read another one
this
because
four
that
old
doesn't
men
count.
sitting there going, "Do you remember things?"
Another one.
Do you remember that? We've already gone so over the hour this week that we might as well just push
it's
on.
Fine,
Chris, what's
I think.
next?
Yeah, so I'm trying to read this username. T8 Stardimthedra. How do you pronounce Tate Stard? Anyway, it's there. Anyone remember the Bone Shaker sweets? It was a little plastic coffin with
Yes.
swizzle style bone shaped sweets in them. Used to try and complete a skeleton out of it. Huh, fun. Nothing like playing with your food. But it was just random bone parts. Yep, love those.
Yeah,
remember
random
buying them.
bones.
Yep, sorry.
Real bones?
Little random bone parts, maybe made from real bone, I don't know. But there was them. There was also like the Builder Burger one. Do you remember them? Little jelly burger thing, and you get all the layers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
With. This was, Dave, do you want to read the next one? It's from our good friend Rob, aka Peepo UK. Oh, he's actually said the same thing. We've had Pacers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Read another one, Dave.
Johnny! Piglets. They were like a tiny 3D crisp in the shape of a pig that tasted of bacon. Always wondered how they were made. Piglets washed down with a carton of Umbongo.
I do not remember them at all.
I remember Umbongo.
I remember Umbongo. Yeah, they drink in the Congo. But I don't
that's right.
Piglets. Gareth, is there a snack of choice that you used to enjoy that you can no longer buy?
South African one, perhaps?
Well, yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of South African sweets that I can't get here because there seems to be some sort of embargo on, I think, dairy or maybe additives that South Africans put into this the food that we can't get here. So, so there's a lot of South African things I can't get. But on the list there, I saw someone talking about Ghostbusters. And I remember when the Ghostbuster crisps came out, they used to have a lot more flavors, and then eventually they whittled it down just to the one flavor that we have these days. Do we even still get them in this country? I can't remember.
I've not seen Ghostbusters crisps. You can get Star Raiders again, but I've not seen Ghostbusters crisps. Yeah,
I have to buy up some of these.
And then the correct answer is far too low on the list. I'm afraid it should be at the top. Terry's Pyramid from Rich Neptune. It was a giant cream egg height dark chocolate pyramid that came in a pyramid shaped cardboard box filled with the same minty fondant they used in the Mint Munchies. They weren't called Mint Munchies. You had Munchies and you had
After Eights.
It wasn't After Eight, was it? It was Terry's. Do you remember there was the fondant filled chocolate square mints? I can't remember what they were called now. But Munchies was the non-minty one. Anyway, I blooming love those things. He goes on to say, although my older, wiser taste buds now prefer savory snacks, I would love to eat one more. And yes, I love pyramids. And also my taste buds in the same way as eating a cream egg now. If I eat a cream egg now, my teeth feel like they're just going to fall out of my head. So I can't take that sweetness anymore. But Terry's Pyramid is the correct answer. I'm calling it. Dave, I muted you because you were rustling a lot. So if you have something to say now, you might want to unmute yourself. No, he's just holding his Orpheus up to the camera.
He's too excited.
Too excited. There he is.
Yeah, this has just arrived. This is my Orpheus 2 arrived as we were recording. I'm super excited about it. It's a Gravis ultrasound along with a Sound Blaster Pro compatible thing and a proper rolling MIDI thing all in one in an ISA slot, an ISA, not ISA. Not ISA.
Did it
so
cost,
that's just arrived, so I'm very excited.
Did it cost? How many Shadow of the Beast 2s did that cost?
More than one.
Well, how much was a Shadow of a Beast? How much is a Shadow of a Beast 2?
The new old stock Shadow of the Beast 2 with unopened t-shirt, everything complete, was £150.
That's not bad.
Including shipping, plus he threw in a couple of extra Psygnosis games as well. So.
That's actually not bad.
Okay.
I've seen them go for more, and not new old
deal.
stock. Not new old stock, Neil. That's a good price. Well done. Well done. Oh, that's a beautiful card.
A lot more expensive, I'm afraid. This is like 2 of those.
There you go.
Lovely
You
thing.
should have bought Shadow of the Beast, Dave. So a new question for this week is, how do you fill the imagination gap when playing games, old or new? What takes the immersion to the next level for you? You can take part in our question of the week over at our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. You can also submit stories for our consideration that we may or may not pick to chat about. But even if they don't appear in the show, they do stimulate lots of conversations on the subreddit, and there's a lovely little community developing there, as well as on our Discord chat server, discord.gg/RMC Retro, where you can enter the This Week in Retro room or take part in the wider conversation about anything and everything that goes on in that server. Lots of happy chatters in there. Thank you again, Gareth, for joining us today. Look out for his future covers on Pixel Addict magazine. Gareth, can you tease us with anything that may or may not be appearing on the cover of the next issue?
I'm busy with it right now. All I can say is it involves a shelf.
Well, there we go. What a teaser. It involves a shelf. Look out for that exciting shelf in the next issue of Pixel Addict magazine, pixel.addict.media, to find out more about that. And we will see you same place, same time next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave, Chris from 005 AGIMA, and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.